Um, just a minute. All right, j'ouvre maintenant la séance.
So I declare the meeting open. Welcome to meeting number 100 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin, Anish, and Ambe people.
In a hybrid format, pursuant to standing orders, and members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. While public health authorities have suggested that you do not any longer require mask wearing indoors or the precinct, I would like to say that COVID-19 and the flu is rampant out there, so if you would wear a mask, that would be great for yourself and others. I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone in the room that participants are not allowed to take screenshots, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons, so you can go and look at it there. Now, this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, and as such, feedback can occur, and it's harmful to the ears of the interpreters quite often. So what I'd ask you to do is, if you have any of your devices or anything, make sure that your mics are off when you're not speaking. Make sure that you have things far away from the mic so that you don't get feedback sound. And also, every question you have or anything you want to say, please address it to the chair. So it's my pleasure to welcome the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission today. We have Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer Vicky Atreides, Rachel Fournette, General Counsel and Deputy Executive Director, Legal Services, and Scott Shortliff, Executive Director, Broadcasting, and they're here in person in the room. And we're going to welcome you and ask you to begin your presentation. I'm told you say you don't need 10 minutes, you'll do 8. So we'll give you the floor for 8 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having us. I would also like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I am joined today by our Head of Broadcasting, Scott Shortliff, and our General Counsel, Rachel Fournette. So let me just quickly touch on 3 things before we get into questions. First, how the CRTC is set up. Second, the context within which we operate. And finally, how we are prioritizing our work. So starting with how we're set up. As you know, the CRTC is an independent, quasi-judicial tribunal that operates at arm's length from government. We hold public hearings on telecommunications and broadcasting matters, and we make decisions based on the public record. The Commission has 9 members, a chair, a vice chair for telecommunications, a vice chair for broadcasting, and 6 full-time regional commissioners who are located across the country. And supporting the 9 decision makers is a team of expert staff like my colleagues who are here with me today. That brings me to the context within which we operate. As we know, Canada's communications sector touches every aspect of our daily lives. It's the pathway that connects us to each other, to our communities, and to the world around us. Since taking on my role earlier this year, I've had the privilege of meeting with and listening to a range of stakeholders from across the country, and I've heard about the importance of our communications sector. Let me share just a couple of examples. In Whitehorse, we heard many stories about the state of communications in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. We heard about one isolated community where students could not pivot to online learning because of a lack of connectivity. Their children lost 1, 2, and 3 years of education. Another example takes us 5,000 kilometers away from Whitehorse to Halifax. As you know, there were devastating wildfires in the area over the summer. We heard firsthand from community members about how they relied on local radio stations to give them the latest updates on the location of fires and also the need to evacuate. And we've heard countless other stories about the importance of our communication sector. We know that the CRTC has an important role in regulating the sector. So that brings me to our areas of focus. Earlier this year, we set out 3 priority areas for the CRTC. First, promoting competition to deliver reliable and high-quality internet and cell phone services to Canadians. Second, modernizing Canada's broadcasting system to promote Canadian and Indigenous content. And third, improving the CRTC to better serve Canadians. Let me briefly touch on each. En commençant par les télécommunications.
Promoting competition, we're taking continuous steps to improve the choice and affordability for Canadians while supporting investment in high-quality networks. A good example of how we are advancing is a good example of how we promote this work. In May, the CRTC established regulations that allow regional competitors to be present throughout the Canadian territory by using the networks of cell companies. Thanks to this access, the regional stakeholders have broadened things and offered the Canadian population a better choice. But our approach to access is only a transitional one. Regional suppliers can use the access from now, but they also have to put in place their own independent networks within a 7-year period. Our approach is already providing results. Canadians can now go online today and find offers from both that were not available. These early improvements are an indication that we are moving in the right direction in cell phone service competition, and we are working towards promoting competition for internet services as well. In March, we launched a proceeding on the internet services market to increase competition, create more choice, and lower prices. 2 weeks ago, we released an initial decision as part of this proceeding. On a temporary and expedited basis, the CRTC is providing competitors with a workable way to sell internet services using the fiber to the home networks of large telephone companies in the provinces where competition has declined most significantly. We are continuing our work on this proceeding and will be holding a public hearing in February. We have a lot of other work underway on the telecommunications front.
Broadcasting side. Parliament has given us a mandate under the Online Streaming Act to set up a modern broadcasting framework. The changes needed to implement the Modernized Broadcasting Act are substantial and they're complex. In May, we published a plan that sets out a phased approach to modernizing the regulatory framework. As part of this plan, we launched 4 initial consultations. In response, we have received over 600 submissions. Many of them are long and detailed, and all of them show that people are highly engaged. The first consultation looked at which online streaming services need to provide basic information, while the second looked at basic conditions of service. The third consultation involves the regime for fees, which recovers the CRTC's costs of regulating the industry. And the fourth consultation looks at contributions that players need to make to support the broadcasting system. Today, and right after this appearance, we are on day 4 of a 3-week public hearing on this consultation. We have heard from approximately 20 interveners so far and look forward to hearing from over 100 more. During this hearing, we are exploring whether streaming services should make an initial contribution to the Canadian content system, and if so, where it should go. We are also asking whether this would help level the playing field with Canadian companies who are already required to support Canadian content. Through our hearing, we are building a robust and a diverse public record that will enable us to make decisions in the public interest. Comme vous le savez, le Parlement...
As you know, Parliament has also given us a new mandate to see the law on online news requires that we put in place a negotiating framework that is fair between the news enterprises in Canada and major online platforms. We have published our plan, and we will soon have a public consultation process. Our third area of action is focused behind the scenes, and that is improving the CRTC to better serve Canadians. What I have heard directly from people that the CRTC needs to move quickly and transparently, given the impact our decisions have on consumers, businesses, and the Canadian economy. We have listened, and we are becoming a faster and more transparent commission. We're doing more to engage with Canadians. We're clearing backlogs. We're looking at our internal processes to see how we can do better, and we're dealing with applications in a more timely way.
Minutes, so maybe I can just end with an earlier thought, which is that Canada's communications sector touches every aspect of our daily lives. We understand the importance of the sector, we understand the importance of our work, and the CRTC will continue to work hard to connect people through technology and through culture. Thank you again for inviting us to appear today. We appreciate the opportunity and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. That was very succinct, and you stuck to your timelines that you told us you were going to. And now we're going to have a question and answer segment. The first one is 6 minutes. And so what will happen is you will get questions, and you will answer, and that is included in the 6 minutes. It's not just 6 minutes for questions. So please remember, everyone, to be as succinct as you possibly can so we could get as many questions in as we possibly can. So we begin with the Conservatives, Ms. Thomas, Rachel Thomas, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Missy Trudees, thank you for being with us here today. We've been looking forward to having you at the table, and it's taken a little while to finally coordinate this, so we appreciate your time. During the debate during Bill C-11, as you're aware, there was great conversation with regards to user-generated content and whether or not it was scoped in. The government tried to insist that it wasn't. What I note, however, is that in their directive to the CRTC, they've had to make that explicit. So they've made the distinction, or they've distinguished for you, that user-generated content is not to be regulated. Now, if that's already not in the legislation, why would that distinction need to be made in your directive?
Thank you for the question. I would say that we know that user-generated content is out. That is clear to us. I can't speak to why something was in a directive or not.
Okay, but if it's not in the legislation, why does that need to be a specific directive given to you?
We do have clarity at the CRTC that user-generated content is not within scope, but I couldn't speak to why it was spelled out in a directive.
Do you not feel that you could have interpreted the legislation without that directive?
I will turn things over to our head of broadcasting to speak a little bit further about that.
Having a directive from government is absolutely within the purview of the government. Because we're arm's length, we don't engage in a long dialogue with them about our understanding of the Act. We received the Act, we interpreted it, and when we received it, the government has fulfilled its, or used its power to give us greater clarity. Whether or not we already had realized some of those things or not is something the government wouldn't be aware of because we're arm's length. The government felt that there would be usefulness in giving us greater clarity about the Act. We've received it, and certainly we will apply it in the spirit in which it was intended.
So I understand what you're saying here today, and of course, you're going to take that position. I find it very interesting, as do many Canadian creators, that the government tried to insist that user-generated content was not scoped in within the legislation, but then needed to give a directive to the CRTC with regard to that end. That actually suggests that it is, in fact, within the framework of the legislation, hence the need for the directive. Nevertheless, you also mentioned that you function at an arm's length. Your mandate letter says, quote, the independence of the CRTC along with the transparency of its processes will be of the highest importance. However, there is a page on the CRTC's website titled Myths and Misconceptions. And when I read it, it is verbatim the talking points from the minister's office, the talking points that he used over and over and over again in the House of Commons and right here at this committee table. So I'm curious as to who authorized the publishing of the Myths and Facts page.
So I can briefly speak to that and I can turn things over to our head of broadcasting. We are an independent quasi-judicial tribunal.
I'm just curious who authorized the publication of that page.
So we are independent. The CRTC.
I understand. I'm just curious who authorized it.
the CRTC did draft those myths and facts in order to provide some clarity for Canadians in terms of what was going to happen with the implementation of the legislation. So that is something that was drafted by and approved by the CRTC.
Okay, Ms. Uchidis, as the head of that organization, did you authorize it?
I did.
Okay, thank you. That was simple. I'm now curious because I have this OPQ in front of me, which is an access to information that members of parliament, of course, can submit. And in it, one of the question that was asked by my colleague, Mr. Shields, was what type of communication took place between the department and the CRTC? And one of the things that went from the department over to the CRTC was, quote, media lines and questions and answers. That doesn't speak of independence. Why would the Heritage Department send you media lines and questions and answers if you're functioning at an arm's length?
So I can tell you with full certainty that we absolutely are independent. I do know that our communications team sometimes does share some communications information, not for comment, but just for information.
Okay, but questions and answers. Could you not come up with those on your own if you're supposed to be functioning independent?
Again, I can't speak to exactly what was shared, but the communications teams do sometimes share some communications information for information.
Okay, so not exactly independent. One of the things that is said by the CRTC is that content and digital creators will not be regulated. Of course, on September 29th, out came a podcast registry. Now, I understand that you will try to lead this committee to believe that you are not actually regulating podcasters, but rather the platforms. But what's interesting is that podcasters rely on those platforms in order to get their podcasts out. And of course, by regulating the platforms, those that use them are in fact regulated. For example, if a bookstore is mandated that they can only sell red books, that doesn't impact the publishers. The publishers aren't being regulated. In fact, they are, because of course, if they publish a blue book, its sales are going nowhere. A green book, its sales are going nowhere. So in looking after the platform or mandating things to the platform, you are in fact mandating those that are producing content. Is that not true?
And I'll be very clear with this, we are not regulating individual podcasts. We are not regulating podcast content, and we are not regulating podcast creators.
Sure, I understand that you're not doing that directly, but you are doing it indirectly, and it's a distinction without a difference. We'll leave it there.
So if there's time to respond to that, perhaps I could explain what that decision did, which... Okay, thank you. Which was ask that large platforms provide basic information like contact information with respect to their services, and that would include podcasts. And that is the extent of it. So I wouldn't say that it's that we are regulating in that
Why
space.
are you asking for registration?
I'm sorry, your time is up. Oh, no, sorry, you have a minute. I'm sorry, I didn't see the one there. Pardon?
Don't.
Pardon?
6 minutes.
Sorry, okay, sorry, I think you've gone over time. I wasn't paying a lot of attention to the stopwatch. Thank you. And so now I go to for the Liberals, Ms. Hepner.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, guys, I'm on a 14-minute jet lag, and I'm kind of a little bit whatever.
So
Sorry.
you're going to give me those 10 seconds back, right?
Yes, I'll give you the 10 seconds back, Lisa, absolutely.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Estridis. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Very close.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for being here with us today. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to respond more fulsomely to the previous question. So, what does it mean that the CRTC is an independent quasi-judicial body?
So thank you for the question. So we operate as a quasi-judicial tribunal, which is like a court. So we are independent. All of our decisions are based on the public record. We hold public proceedings, and our decisions are made by basing them on the public interest and what is put before us.
And so if the CRTC came up with a really well phrased myths and facts page on new legislation. Does it seem reasonable that a minister would use maybe those same lines that came from the CRTC?
So it would be hard for me to speculate as to whether that was used. I would say, and this comes down to our third priority, which I touched on, which is to better serve Canadians. Putting forward the myths and facts page was one way that we want it to be more transparent and give more certainty to Canadians.
Thank you. I'd like to go back now to what I was originally going to ask you, and that's about you taking on this role quite recently. You have a background in law, in teaching law with the Competition Bureau, and I'm wondering if you can tell us what those experiences bring to this role.
Thank you for that. So before taking on this role at the CRTC earlier this year, I spent over 23 years in the private and public sectors, mainly in the area of regulatory law. Obviously, I've had the chance to work in the area of telecommunications and digital technologies. At my 12 years at the Competition Bureau in senior roles. I actually started my career appearing before tribunals like the CRTC, so like the Copyright Board and the Competition Tribunal. And the various leadership positions that I've had over the past many years within the public service have set me up nicely to work at the CRTC among an incredible expert group of staff and expert commissioners.
Do you think Canadians understand the role of the CRTC? And if not, how would you explain it to them?
I do think that we can do better. When you mention the CRTC, what we often hear, and I'm sure that committee members hear this as well, is people pay too much for their cell phone bills, and those are the kinds of things that we hear about often. I do think there's opportunity to do better. I would come back to what our mandate is, and that is really it's regulating the broadcasting and telecommunications industries. But we've put forward areas of focus because the volume is huge. I think, as everybody here knows, the volume is huge, and so we don't want a D grade on everything. We'd like to focus on the areas that have the most importance and the highest impact. And so that is really making sure that we have competition on the telecommunications side. So that's for internet and cell phone services, making sure that we reach out to Indigenous, rural, and remote communities, making sure that broadband is rolling out there, and then on the broadcasting side, ensuring that we have a modern framework, which is what we are right in the middle of in terms of the hearing that's going on right now.
How important do you think it is that we have a modern framework for the Broadcasting Act?
It's critical. We've, again, as I said, we're on day 4 today of a 3-week public hearing. We've heard from a wide variety of stakeholders over the past few days. We've heard from traditional broadcasters who have said that they are shackled by regulation and they're having a very difficult time competing. We've heard from creators who say that they need more money in the system. We've heard from online services and global online services who say that they already make huge contributions. So we've heard from a lot of stakeholders so far. That will continue over the next 2.5 weeks. But certainly we've heard that there is a need to make some changes.
How much power does the CRTC really have to regulate internet giants that are based in other countries?
So the Online Streaming Act gives us the mandate to do that. So we will take the mandate that has been given to us by Parliament, and we will implement it.
Did you find since your appointment that your goals or your priorities changed at all? Did anything take you by surprise since you took on this role?
Okay, thank you. I would say what has taken me by surprise is just it's the volume of work. There's a lot, and coming in, I saw that we had over 400 decisions, notices, and orders that go out every single year, and that's sort of our bread and butter, if I can put it that way. And then we have very big issues like how do we fix cell phone and internet competition and modernize the Broadcasting Act at the same time. So that's why we've focused on priority areas.
Would you say you need more people or more resources in order to more adequately fulfill your mandate?
I think the answer to that is always yes, but what I would say is that we are well prepared to do the work that we need to do right now, and
Thank
to the
you.
extent that we need more resources, I will ask for
Thank
them.
you very much. And now I go to the Bloc Québécois, Martin Champeau, for 6 minutes, Martin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank all three of you for being here. It was a long-awaited meeting. It was a pleasure meeting you. I hear you answering these questions. We have a lot of concerns with everything that has to do with the review of the act that we're working on. And you said earlier in your opening speech that you received 600 briefs, demands, applications from different groups across Canada, and you have heard 20 so far. To me, that's somewhat troubling. It seems that the task is really heavy. Do you think you will be able to deliver on that mandate in the time frames that will allow us to promote culture, the broadcasting area, our producers, or is this task too heavy with the resources you have right now? Thanks so much for the question. Absolutely, we feel ready. I would say we have an expert team that will be assisting us. We also have members from the CHPC that are experts on the panel with me, and our decisions will be based on the briefs we receive. The minister recently stated that she hoped that we should be able to have a new regulatory framework by 2025 for us. In the culture sector, for broadcasters, 2025 is an eternity. All kinds of things can happen until then on a policy perspective. And this area that is so delicate, do you think you have the means to act with urgently? I think the machinery is heavy and it's not really well equipped to face the needs. Well, I will start and then I'll ask my colleague to add a few words. Yes, we fully understand the urgency. That's clear. That's why we started these consultations very quickly. We have a kind of a staggered approach. That's why we did that. And when you talk about 2025, when I say it's too far, 2025 does allow you some elbow room. It could be 13 months, but you could also see it as over 2 years. So do you think we can implement this early in 2025, talking about the regulatory framework, or am I being too optimistic about that? Thanks for your question. I will start, and I'll ask my colleague to add some ideas. We have already started making decisions. There are 2 decisions that have already been rendered, and we'll carry on that way. So there are some interim stages also involved. Yesterday, the CEO of Quebeco, we know what happened with the cuts in TV, TVA. This is quite difficult for the television sector in Quebec, the largest private broadcaster in Quebec that has to cut 547 positions. It's a nightmare. Mr. Pelado says that our activities are being destroyed by regulation, and TVA has been really pushed to the wall. So they have done all the trimming that they could just to continue to staying on air. And this means that after that, they don't really have any other possibilities. Do you think that there is a future for television in the current model? How did you interpret Mr. Pelado's statements? And the Vice President of Bell had similar complaints about very restrictive regulations. Yes, this situation is quite troubling for us. We heard what Quebeco had to say. We started with Quebeco last Monday morning, so It's a troubling situation for us. But that, again, that's why we are acting quickly to determine right now whether we should put it in place. Some contributions right now. When you talk about contributions, I talking about additional tariffs, or can you explain what form that would take? Yes. As the chair said, we're currently looking at some of the initial tariffs that some of the digital platforms can do to strengthen the broadcasting system in Canada. Since we're in a hearing format, we cannot really provide too many details. We have a panel that's looking into these matters. These issues are very important for the CRTC. That's why we started with that particular hearing on a priority basis. I think it's a very good idea. I agree with you. Yes, you have 15 seconds. Thank you. Taking into account the reactions of these digital companies faced with all the regulations before them, don't you think it's somewhat a pious wish?
J'y reviendrai.
I'm going to go to the New Democratic Party, and that would be Peter Julian. Peter, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank our witnesses. We'll do a follow-up on Mr. Shampoo's question. Yes, indeed, when you're talking about contributions, or what scale are we talking about? A $500,000 contribution is not the same as $300 million. So what would be the capacities, the tools to strengthen that kind of regime? These are the issues specifically that the CRTC is looking at. What's the nature of these tariffs? So what's the nature? These are the things that the CRTC is looking into right now. I can say some international groups appeared during the hearing. I'm thinking specifically of Google, and the Commission, the act we are implementing now does provide us with tools to come up with regulations that would oblige some of the major players to contribute on a higher basis. So they are discussing with us, and we have a good view of that. Thank you. I think Google is receiving over $1 billion a year in indirect grants because Canadians are subsidizing them. All businesses that want to do advertisement on Google, that's $1 billion a year. And these major technology corporations can make increased contributions. It's important.
Are gouged mercilessly by cell phone, the big telecom. And we have a market monopoly of over 90%. Canadians pay among the highest prices in the world, often, as you cited in your introductory remarks, so often without the service that goes with it. So internet and cell phone fees in the midst of the affordability crisis that so many Canadian families are facing are a critical aspect of reducing the gouging that is going on when people go to the grocery store, when they go to the gas pumps, when they try to use their cell phone or have internet access. I note that one of the criticisms of the CRTC regime is the following. CRTC regime places all of its bets on existing regionally bound competitors who have already demonstrably failed to provide sufficient price discipline and service innovation despite years of effort. As the Commission itself notes, the dominant providers exercise market power at a national level, allowing them to weather a substantial amount of competitive pressure in any particular region. How do you respond to those criticisms that what the CRTC is putting in place simply will not address the affordability crisis that comes from the massive gouging by big telecom?
So this is something that we have heard from many Canadians about how unhappy they are with respect to their bills and service. So we can use the levers that we have. And what we've done on the cell phone side is to allow regional providers to access the networks of the large companies for a period of time. They need to do that within 7 years and build out their own networks. But that has already shown a more choice in the market, and we've seen that recently. And as I said in my opening remarks, just over the past year, you can see plans now, both from regional carriers and also from the national providers, that are better for Canadians than they were previously. We are also taking all kinds of other steps in terms of through our broadband fund, making sure that we reach out to rural, remote, and Indigenous communities so that they have more choice there as well.
To address the takeover of Shaw by Rogers, it was rubber stamped by the Liberal government, tragically. I was on the picket line just last weekend with Shaw workers, longtime workers, who were basically locked out by Rogers, and they're using massively replacement workers. Now, the NDP is pressed for anti-scab legislation. That'll be before the House. Is before the House now, and we are expecting that will be adopted. But to what extent does the CRTC see with a bad eye that this type of actions by big telecom, where they run roughshod over their workers and simply lock them out and bring in replacement workers rather than negotiating in good faith a collective agreement?
So I would just come back to the CRTC's role and our mandate as an independent quasi-judicial tribunal. Our focus is on regulating telecommunications, promoting competition.
Thank you. The issue of resources has come up repeatedly. Ms. Hepner raised it, Mr. Champoux as well. You have a huge mandate, an important mandate, given what is happening right now in our broadcasting sector, what's happening with cell phone and internet gouging, what's happening with the foreign interference, for example. To what extent do you need additional resources? Because there are delays that have and complaints about the delays in CRTC's decisions, and often there has not been the tools in place for the CRTC to follow up and ensure that the companies comply.
I'm sorry, Mr. Julian. We're going to have to ask that for that answer in the next round. Thank you. So now we go to the second round, which is a 5-minute round, not 6-minute round. And we begin with, for the Conservatives, Kevin Waugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, everybody. I've been around here for a few years. C18 originally was supposed to help the newspapers in this country. It's done anything but, as you know, the big telcos got their hands into it, including the public broadcaster, who wants another additional $172 million. It's interesting because Ms. Tate was in that chair a few weeks ago. They get $1.4 billion from the public. They get $400 million in advertising, and yet they want their hands into C18. So when the bill originally came, it was for the newspapers. And as I said, in the last year, I have gobs of newspapers that have gone under. You know, Metroland. 650 jobs lost. I can talk about Pincher Creek, Vermilion. I have some in my province. And so when I look at your mandate letter, Ms. Treaties, it says Online News Act seeks to enhance fairness in the Canadian digital news marketplace. Fairness. It's intended to benefit diversity of news business, including local and independent outlets. How can that be? The newspapers are absolutely pushed out in this conversation. Just your thoughts on the newspapers being pushed out when originally C18 was all about the local newspapers.
So we are concerned about news and the state of news, as I know this committee is and Canadians are. You know, I would say with respect to newspapers specifically, the CRTC does not have a role or mandate in regulating newspapers or diversity of voices. What we have is a limited mandate under the Online News Act, under C18, to put in place this bargaining framework.
I thought you did have a role in diversity of news business. That's your mandate. You just told me you don't.
not for newspapers. And we can elaborate on that if you'd like.
Well, that's a gap in the system then. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously and clearly have a role in in news and broadcasting, which we take very seriously. But it's important to note the difference between C11 and C18. C11 gives us a large policy questions. There's a number of policy objectives. We have to figure out how to achieve them. With C18, we're basically being asked to administer a policy that the government is setting in regulation and which will be in regulation by the end of the year. But our role is really to facilitate the commercial negotiations that are based on what we've been given. So for better or for worse, we're not being asked to regulate in the newspaper environment. Newspaper policy is something that very much sits with the Department of Canadian Heritage. Having said that, once we have that mandate, we will take very seriously our role to help facilitate those commercial arrangements.
So in your mandate, you're instructed to make a free and independent press your priority. That's what it says. So how can you concede this government continues to spend millions on media? Tuesday, they just threw another $100 million at journalism. To me, there's a line. This government continues to throw money at journalism, and yet you are an independent press. Your priority is, there is a crossover here. When the government starts throwing money at journalism, there is an issue with journalism as we go forward on that. And you know, your role as independent now, when you see millions of dollars being spent on journalists, there is a line of integrity that I think has been crossed.
So I would come back to the CRTC's role. What I would say is that under C11 and under the hearings that we're holding right now, we are looking at whether certain money, if we do go the base contribution route for online streaming services, should some of that money go to news funds?
Okay, so finally, I only have 45 seconds. June 14th, C18 passed. That was the day Bell laid off 1,300 employees, 6% of their workforce. Then they shut down 6 radio stations. Then on that same day C18 passed, they turn to you and say, we want to do less local news. What was your response to Bell officials that day?
20 seconds?
That request that came in the form of an application is still with commission staff.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kevin. And we go to the Liberals. Anna Gainey for 5 minutes. Anna?
Merci. Et merci de votre présence.
Thank you for being here today with us. These are very interesting presentations. I will begin with by saying that I share some of the concerns relating to TVA with my colleague and the situation over there. Obviously, the changes in telecommunications are taking place on a faster and faster rhythm, and we hear these examples of loss of jobs. Was the CRTC flexible enough to meet up with the speed of these changes and the impact on the Canadian industry? Thanks for the question. Yes, I think we have been quite adaptable. Yes, we are a tribunal. Basically, we have some very formal proceedings. We have hearings. We listen to witnesses from stakeholder groups. That's a significant aspect of our job in order to make decisions. As we said, we've heard of examples of major changes. There was a recent case where there was a very urgent situation, and the Commission decided to prioritize that issue to render a decision very quickly. Yes, absolutely. We are flexible.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'm picking up the time from Ms. Gainey, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much for being with us. You know, it's always interesting to hear my Conservative colleagues speak about what appears to be disdain for the media, given that they in 2014 spent $20 million monitoring it, and they talk about wanting to defund the CBC in their caucus, but I find it remarkable that their members they're even out of touch with their members because their members voted down a motion to defund the CBC. So I want to put that on the record as we start, because I think it's important that sometimes what you may hear from Conservatives members may not reflect, Conservative MPs may not actually reflect the will of Canadians. So, or the facts. So let's talk about the facts. Your myths and facts page that seems to be the topic of a lot of conversation. Did you draft it, or did the minister's office draft it?
The CRTC drafted it.
And did you share it with them for their feedback, or did you share it with them for information, or did you share it with them as you would to anybody else?
We don't share documents with anybody for feedback. Those are CRTC only documents.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk of how you were purported to want to regulate podcasts. Are you in the business of regulating podcasts?
No.
Are you collecting information on podcasts?
We're not collecting information on podcasts, but perhaps we could just clarify what that
please.
decision did.
Yeah, so what we've asked for that decision is to collect basic information on podcast services, which is literally your legal name, your address, how we can get in contact with you. I mean, it's that is all we're asking for, and that gives us the ability
just to clarify,
collect information down the line if we need it.
So just to clarify, you're looking for information that would tell somebody where a podcast.
Not even that.
Not even that. Okay.
Not even that.
Great.
We're asking podcast services, and you can imagine there's a few who have revenues of over $10 million a year, and we're not even sure if there are big podcast services who have over $10 million a year in Canada, to register with us, to just let us know. We are a service that provides that. We're not asking them to even enumerate what their podcasts are or who their podcasters are.
So let's say Peter and Mr. Julian and I decided we're going to start a podcast, and we're going to have the 10 people that probably care about what we think.
Yeah.
What would we have to do in terms of the CRTC?
Absolutely nothing.
So we would not have to register with you?
No.
We would not have to tell you where we're running our podcast out of?
No.
We would not have to give you the address from where we are broadcasting, or the nature of our content?
No.
So we could sit anywhere, make our own podcast, and say and do what we like, and you're not going to regulate us.
That is absolutely correct.
So for avoidance of doubt, the average person or the average creator of a podcast should not have to worry about any kind of oversight from the CRTC.
That is correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And now we started 5 minutes late, so I'm going to give extra time here. So I want Mr. Shampoo for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Moi, ça m'inquiète un peu le projet.
The podcast project from my colleague Mr. Talabi, somewhat troubles me. Maybe we'll get into that at some future point. I still have concerns, even going back to this summer. There was a vacancy for the technical advisor from Quebec. It stayed vacant, and recently there was an appointment to fill that, but that position has been left vacant for a very long time, at a time when that position was very important, because we're just beginning a study to put or to implement some regulation that has a major impact on broadcasting in Quebec. So this vacancy was of great concern to the industry. Why did it take so much time to find the right person to fill that position, even though there was an abundance of good candidates? As you know, that is a very formal process. That's what the CRTC uses, but I will say right now that Madame Paquet has just assumed her functions. Yes, she will absolutely be consulted on all consultations involving C11, C18. I understand, but the process took a lot longer than usual, especially in a situation of urgency, whereas there were very interesting candidates. The process was too long, and it raised certain concerns, especially in relation to the flexibility of the CRTC we mentioned earlier. Some observers, I don't really want to use the word experts, they say the CRTC is an agency that is regulating an outdated system, whereas we live in a world that is changing very rapidly. So in 30 seconds, how do you answer these criticisms that the CRTC is not really equipped to solve the issues relating to the digital world? Well, I can say we have a team of experts. We have members from across Canada that have great expertise in the areas, and that's of great use to us. Also, our decisions are made on the basis of submissions we receive from stakeholders. So we have major corporations, consumer groups, everyone. So I think we have the adequate information to take the decision. So this is not an issue of great concern regulating the digital. That's what you're saying. Absolutely. Thank you. I don't think I have any more time. Thank you.
For 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I want to come back to the issue of resources for the CRTC. Yesterday in the House of Commons, Leader of the Official Opposition announced a terrorist attack, which turned out to be absolutely false. Now, this came because somebody in their leader's office, the official opposition, obviously was watching the Fox propaganda network, which was also giving that false news. Now, I understand that the Fox propaganda network hearings are being delayed, and any decision on Fox propaganda, which provides a tidal wave of toxic disinformation in Canada. There's no fact-based journalism there, and they're very open about that. The Fox propaganda network hearings and decision is delayed, and I note and come back to the fact that there have been complaints about delays with the CRTC. So you have a very important mandate. Broadcasting is in crisis in many respects. People are being gouged with cell phone and internet fees. We're seeing foreign interference from Fox Propaganda Network and other sources. Do you have the resources to do the job? And I don't share your confidence that you do, given the complaints about delays and given the fact that the CRTC's role is so vitally important. So what do you need? What can this committee suggest to the government that you need in terms of additional resources?
Okay, so thank you for the question. As I've said, we have the resources that we need right now. We will not be shy to ask for additional resources if and when we need them. With respect to the complaint that you're referring to that we had received, we did post that as per our normal process. We posted the complaint. We received over 7,000 submissions in response to that complaint. And, people had very different perspectives on the complaint. But what became very clear is that there was concern about issues around, content and freedom of expression. So what we did was we took
17 seconds.
We took that record and we decided that we are going to hold a broader hearing. So that is forthcoming on how we treat foreign services who are operating in Canada.
Thank you. And I'm going to go now to Mr. Shields for the Conservatives. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And quickly, you described as being independent, arm's length. I've been on C10, C11, C18, so we've heard ministers say that a number of times. So I've got the ATIP question, and you said that you did not send information to the minister. You said that a few minutes ago. So be careful, because I have information here. So they sent it to you then, because I know what they sent. I know went back and forth. So when it talks about media lines, I know what those are. So they sent them to you then. You didn't send them to them, you said. So they sent them to you.
Again, there is some exchange of communications materials.
You said you didn't send them to them. Then they sent them to you, media lines, right?
I don't know what
I do.
media lines.
I do. I've got it here, and I've got the information, so I know. So be careful.
But again, if information is shared for information, then that happens through communications, and it's not for comment.
So they sent it to you. You said you didn't send it to them. So they then sent those media lines to you. Thank you.
I don't
Moving
know
on.
if any media lines
I've
were
got other
sent.
questions to ask.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
I can move on. I can move to my next
You
question.
can move on, but you asked a
Thank
question.
you.
We should hear the answer.
She said
She asked to be able to answer the question.
she gave me the answer. You also Thank you. So, Scott, you said...
Point of
if
order, Madam
needed.
Chair. The witness was asked a question and was not afforded the opportunity to respond.
I did make that point, and
Thank
I
you.
think the witness should be able to respond. The chair decides who responds and who speaks. Go ahead.
Point of order. Point of order.
Yes, Mrs. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. If you seek clarity from the clerk, I believe that you will find that the members of this committee have the ability to make a statement should they wish to, or ask a question. If my colleague chose to make a statement, that is his prerogative.
Well, it sounded like a question, but there you go. If it's
Point
a
of order.
statement, is it a statement, Mr. Shields?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move ahead.
Thank you. So,
No,
Moving
I
on,
think
I have the floor.
He made a
Point of
statement. He
order.
has the floor.
Point
We
of
continue.
order.
Someone else. There's
It was,
another opportunity. Someone can
Point of order, Madam
clarify
Chair.
that.
It wasn't a statement. It was an accusation, and the witnesses should be allowed to respond
Sorry,
if they
Kevin,
if
point of
they
order,
choose
please.
to. If they choose not to respond, that's their prerogative, but they should be given the opportunity to respond.
That's just not true.
thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on. You made the statement, if needed. Now, there's a phrase out there that says, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you. That's an oxymoron in my writing. Very scary. So if you ask, if needed, right, you stated, you're collecting that information if needed, right?
Yes, I did say that, yeah.
What does if needed mean?
If needed in this case means we have a broad mandate to look at the broadcasting system in Canada. We're at the front end of this. The question was raised, does podcasting impact the broadcasting system in Canada? We have no specific questions about it right now. We've preserved the ability to contact large companies that distribute podcasts in the future if needed. I don't see this as particularly controversial to say that there are elements of the broadcasting system we need to be in touch with if we develop policies. We have no policies regarding podcasts on the table at the moment.
But you're saying that if needed.
Yes, absolutely. We're a quasi-judicial tribunal, and I can't speak to a theoretical for the future.
But you're setting it up for that as a registration, basically, because you're saying, if needed, we will need your contact information.
Yes.
Thank you.
If-
Thank you. Appreciate that. One of the things you said is that you're collecting information on what is Canadian attitudes, opinions, ideas, and values, right? You're collecting information, and the documentation says that's what you're collecting information about.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
When you're out there engaging, you're looking for Canadian values, Canadian what are Canadians in podcasting?
My apologies. I'm not sure which document you are referring to. If you're referring to the registration consultation as a whole, we could address that, but I apologize. I'm not aware of the context of your question.
Okay, I'll move to the next one. You're talking about connectivity and the word "the last community." Is that a phrase I've heard today? Getting to the last community.
That's not a phrase that I use.
But I heard that used from one of you saying getting the internet connected to the last community.
To remote, rural, and Indigenous communities?
It's the last community. To the last farm gate is where it needs to be. I'm going to turn the time over to my colleague.
There's 25 seconds from Mrs. Thomas. 20 now.
I just need a mic. Thank you, Chair. At this point in time, I'll be moving a motion. And I, of course, those around this committee table understand that there is only so much time where we are in public and where we have the opportunity to move a motion that we feel is of great importance. As other parties have done, I will take this opportunity. I recognize that we have a witness here, and so I'm happy to move the motion, make a statement, and then we can move to a vote quickly if we wish. The motion is as follows.
Order, Madam Chair. Last time the CRTC was here, we had a filibuster from the Conservatives that blocked the CRTC for testifying for
This
over an
isn't a
hour.
point of order.
And this time, we have another hour
Point of
where
order?
the CRTC
I must
is available.
listen to what the member is saying before I can rule on whether
Are
it's
you
a
yelling
point
at
of
me?
order or not. I'm not, pardon?
Are you yelling at me?
So
No, I'm just trying to speak over you because you continue to speak. Mr. Julian has the floor. He has a point of order.
As do
the,
I.
the last,
Mr. Julian,
the
go ahead.
last time, I note that the last time the CRTC appeared, the Conservatives blocked for over an hour their ability to testify, cutting short our time to ask questions. It appears the Conservatives are doing the same thing this time. That what they want to do is curtail the witnesses and the important questions. I still have many questions to ask the CRTC. I'm very glad they're here. But that's 2 consecutive appearances now where the Conservatives are trying to block the CRTC from responding to our questions. And I believe that that's inappropriate. And again, the Conservatives blocking the CRTC from answering these questions, not in the public interest. So,
Yes, Ms.
Chair, I've tried to remain quiet while Mr. Julian continues to impugn the motives of the Conservative members of this committee. I think Mrs. Thomas was clear that she understands we have witnesses. We only have them for an hour, as far as I know, and that we're at the end of that time, and she's going to quickly move a motion, which I think is not going to take very much time. So it's not a filibuster, and I wish Mr. Julian would quit
I would like to point
mischaracterizing.
out, however, that we have not finished the questions. There's one other question to be left to be asked by the Liberal member. And so I think that is cutting short the questions we're asking the CRTC. So I think Mr. Julian has a point of order. You have responded to it. But I do think it would be nice to have the last question asked.
Madam Chair, I understand that the motion that we were considering at the last meeting will not be moved because we have some resolution around the appearance of the Minister of Sport. So I would ask you to ask our witnesses if they're prepared to stay for another hour, because that would give us more opportunity to fully ask the questions that we have to ask of the CRTC.
That would be out of order because the agenda says that there is only 1 hour. I have stretched the hour because I did want to have everyone have a chance to ask a question of the CRTC. And what we've done is we've suggested that one of the questioners shouldn't ask a question by Ms. Thomas moving. She could wait until the questioner asked a question and then go ahead and move the motion. She has the time to do it if she wishes. And so I would like to see a bit of respect and fairness on this committee so that we don't treat some members of this committee as if they have no authority, no options, and no ability to be involved in the game. Mr. Cotto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I move a motion to move into camera?
No, because there's
No, you
already a
can't.
motion on the floor.
You cannot. There's a motion on the floor already.
Madame la Présidente, un rappel au
I am
règlement pour moi aussi.
asking Ms. Thomas if she would allow
Un rappel au
and a
règlement.
point of respect. Sorry.
A point of order. Mr. Shampoo. Thank you. I think there was an interesting issue relating to courtesy raised by Mr. Julian to see if our guests can stay a little longer, because in any case, we are going to get caught up in a lengthy debate on the motion. So if our guests can stay, we hope to move quickly. But if they cannot stay an additional hour, I think it would be right to thank them and they can leave us. So even if I don't really agree with the idea that we prevent our Liberal colleagues from asking their questions, if we are strictly to follow the rules, Madam Chair, our colleague, Ms. Thomas, is right to raise the motion right now.
And I have acknowledged that, but I'm asking her to just allow, if she could, out of respect, to have one more question asked of another member of this committee.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Both myself and Mr. Shampoo have asked that if you could ask the witnesses if they're prepared to stay longer.
Well, to ask them that, I would need to have consent from the whole committee that they want to do that. We do have a motion on the floor that we have to deal with. And so all I'm trying to do is get us back on order and say, can Ms. Thomas, before she moves her motion, or can she postpone it while Mr. Nur Mohammed asks his question? Because the Liberals have now been cut short of one question in this round. And that's all I'm asking. Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that this committee is familiar with the rules, and of course I can only move a motion when I have the floor. I only have the floor when it's my opportunity to ask a question. So as much as your chastising is taken to heart, Ms. Chair, with respect, it's wrong to imply that I have the opportunity at the end of the question rounds. I do not. The rules of this committee state that I only have the opportunity to move a motion when I have the floor.
I acknowledge that, Ms. Thomas.
I
So
have
I'm
the floor right
asking-
now, and I wish to move a motion.
So, and I would like to finish what I'm saying. I'm asking you to just make say, let Mr. Mohammed come. My motion is still on the floor, and I will turn to you because the motion will be on the floor. That's all I'm asking. But there you go. You don't want to see that, so we will deal with Ms. Thomas's motion. Yes, Mr. Cueto.
Then suggest, considering we had the witnesses for 1 hour and it's now 15 minutes past the scheduled time, that we just we finish with the witnesses and
Yes.
we'll forget about our question then, if that's
Yes,
the case.
I will do that. I was
Yeah.
about to do that because Ms. Thomas has got the ability to move a motion, and it's on the floor now. So I want to thank the witnesses for coming and answering questions. So I'm sorry that we kept you a little longer than you should have been, and I know you may have other things to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the
Yes.
opportunity.
Thank you. And so we will
Point of
continue,
order.
Mr. Newman.
Point of order. Madam Chair, it is disappointing that the Conservatives have chosen to cast aspersions and then deny the Liberals and the Democrats and the Bloc the opportunity to ask questions of the witnesses and to
point
take
of
that
order,
time up.
Madam Chair.
And it yet
Madam
again
Chair.
reflects that there is no real interest in
Point of
doing
order.
the committee's work of the committee.
It's a point of order being. I need to listen to it to know if it's a point of order
Just
or
make
not,
sure the
Mrs.
rules are
Thomas.
applied fairly on
I'm
this
sorry,
side,
Mrs.
then.
Thomas. I need
Oh,
to
so
listen
aggressive.
to know whether I can rule if it's a point of order or not. I'm trying to listen. Sorry, Mr. New Mohammed, go ahead.
And so just for future, Madam Chair, I'm wondering if we can ensure that when we are doing the rounds of questions, that we can ensure that there's enough time to complete the rounds so that everybody would have that opportunity. I mean, looking at the clock, it would have seemed that even if we had finished with Ms. Thomas's, there may have been 1 minute left, even if we had delayed for 5 minutes for us and no time for Mr. Champour or Mr.
Mr.
Julien.
Mohammed, I think we have already dismissed the witnesses, thanked them,
Yeah,
and now we're dealing with Mrs. Thomas's
Just a point of
motion, which she's absolutely correct that she had the opportunity only when she was having the floor. She did have the floor. She moved a motion. We have to deal with it. Sorry, Kevin.
A point of clarification. The Bloc and the NDP were done their
They
questioning.
have already spoken.
They were done their questioning. They were done 2.5 minutes. We had a point of motion here, and this is the procedure. But the Bloc, Mr. Noor Mohammed said the Bloc and the NDP had another round of questioning. They didn't.
Well, so I stand
finished
corrected,
their
Mr.
2.5
Waugh.
minutes.
Mr. Waugh, I stand corrected. So it was really only us.
This is
So I
not a
apologize.
debate. I'm sorry. This is not a debate.
So you scored your point. It's great.
Mr.
of order.
Mr. New Mohammed is absolutely.
Point of
I'm
order.
sorry,
Point of order.
Mr.
Point of order.
Mr. Waugh is correct.
Point of
So-
order.
Sorry.
Point of order. Madam Chair, as I indicated and Mr. Champour indicated, the CRTC was prepared to stay longer, given how at the last time they appeared, the Conservatives blocked their full committee hearing. I was hoping for the courtesy of allowing further questions to the CRTC. They were prepared to stay,
Yeah.
and we had far more questions. So Mr. Noor Mohammed is absolutely right. The NDP and I believe Mr. Champour had a lot more questions to ask of the CRTC in the public interest.
Well, the decision has been made. Ms. Thomas had a motion on the floor. She had the floor and could make the motion, and we now have to move forward. Mr. Thomas, your motion.
Thank you, Chair. The motion that I wish to move is as follows. Given that the Department of Canadian Heritage, under the leadership of the Honourable Pablo Rodriguez, approved anti-racism grants upwards of $130,000 to Laith Maroof of the Community Media Advocacy Centre, CMAC, on October 21st, 2022, the Honorable Pablo Rodriguez appeared before the Heritage Committee, during which time he was asked by a number of members of Parliament about the date he was made aware of Laith Marouf's derogatory remarks about Jews and Francophones, and the Minister reported to the committee that he was not informed until after August 22nd, 2022. And given that an article by the Globe and Mail and an access to information request indicate emails circulated from the former Diversity and Inclusion Minister, the Honourable Ahmed Hussein, his former Chief of Staff, Minister Rodriguez's former Chief of Staff, and the Deputy Minister of Canadian Heritage between August 17th and August 19th, 2022, including one sent to Minister Rodriguez's personal email account titled Laith Marouf and Anti-Semitic Hate Speech. The committee invite the former Minister for Canadian Heritage, the Honourable Pablo Rodriguez, to appear before the committee as soon as possible for no fewer than 2 hours to clarify his remarks concerning Laith Marouf, and that the committee report its findings to the House. To the committee through you, Chair. The reason why this motion is important is because the members here will recall the former Minister of Heritage, Mr. Pablo Rodriguez, was brought before this committee and asked questions with regards to Laith Marouf's hiring and as to when the minister was made aware of Laith Marouf's anti-Semitic behavior and conduct on social media platforms. And the minister told this committee that he did not find out until it was announced in the media. But we have an ATIP that actually shows that the minister was made aware through an email to his P9 account. And that email was sent between August 17th and August 19th, before things broke in the media. And that email was titled Laith Marouf and Anti-Semitic Hate Speech. That's pretty clear. That's a pretty clear indication to the minister that there's a problem. And so the minister either misled this committee or didn't do his job with great competency. I'd like to give him the opportunity to clarify which one is it. And so in order to give him that opportunity to clarify, he would need to come to this committee and give us the opportunity to ask questions. Hence, the motion that I have put on the table today, which asks for him to come for no fewer than 2 hours, so that we would be able to finally, hopefully, I guess, get to the bottom of this and understand what took place here. I mean, after all, $130,000 were given by the Heritage Department to a raging anti-Semite and someone who also rages against Francophones. And in that $130,000 was given to him to run anti-racism training. It's insane. It is the definition of insanity. And so it is incumbent upon the minister to come to this committee and to answer questions that we have with regard to what happened. And further to that, to answer questions with regard to when he knew about Laith Marouf and his horrible conduct, incredibly vile remarks. And further to that, this is an individual who continues to make these remarks. And this is an individual who is supposed to pay back the $130,000 now that it's been brought to the government's attention by the official opposition. However, more than 9 months have passed since that was demanded of him, and not a single dime has been paid back. That's a problem. And so I'm curious as to how the minister, the former minister, would justify what has happened here. And the only way that that can be, settled is for the minister to have the opportunity to come here and to clarify former remarks that he made that now seem to be falsehoods, and to clarify as to why this decision was made with 130,000 Canadian taxpayer dollars. That's my motion. Consider it moved.
Mr. Martin Champoux.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a very sensitive issue, certainly for the Jewish community, for Francophones. Laith Marouf is a sinister person. I think we have all seen recently, in the context of the Israel-Hamas conflict, that Mr. Maruf has gone totally crazy on social networks. He comes up with very unrealistic, bizarre statements that have a lot of racist overtones. And the fact that the government offered him such an amount of money to promote anti-racism, this is quite incredible. So, Madam Chair, we have carried out some hearings in this committee when this issue first broke at the start of the year. We had an opportunity to listen to Ministers Hussein and Rodriguez, who appeared before our committee to answer questions. And I think the way this works is the Department of Inclusion and Diversity, or that branch within the Heritage Department, was involved. And some of the answers I heard were satisfactory as far as how things work. Mr. Rodriguez explained clearly that the Heritage Department is structured such that ministers take care of issues, different functions that are not really under the Heritage Department. It doesn't really seem like quite a logical structure. They didn't come up with this, but that seems to be how things work. So the minister was quite, I think it was Mr. Hussein who showed great incompetence in handling this issue. I think if Mr. Rodriguez had been informed after several attempts to communicate with him, especially Mr. Howe's father, amongst others, tried to contact him, it's because we didn't get any response from Mr. Hussein. And I don't think that we can blame ourselves for getting on board somewhat late. I don't think it's a relevant issue right now. So, Madam Chair, I like fishing. I like fishing for salmon. And I know that you don't sell the small fry that you catch. You have to sell the big fish. I think that's what the Conservatives are trying to do. They are just trying to net a big fish here, and I don't think that's the right way to go about it. So instead of accusing people, trying to say people are guilty, well, I'm not going to go too far. I don't want to exaggerate with my imagery. But I think we have to concentrate on what is really serious, what really matters here. It's the things we're still hearing in the social media from this individual. We have to act on that. So far, the measures that have been undertaken, even though the department tried to recover the money given to this individual, some of the measures taken are somewhat timid. They're not very bold. We say, okay, we haven't really gotten the money back. We just give the impression that we will get the money and we can even go to a recovery agency. So I just want to know where we are in recovering this money. Steps were taken clearly. We said that we've taken serious steps to recover the $130,000 when we had hearings on this at the start of the year. We need to hear what measures the government has come up with to prevent such an incident. Those are my concerns. Receiving a minister or a former minister, and that had really nothing to do with decisions on that matter. To me, it's not really interesting. I just want to hear what aspects were bad, how things were mismanaged. But it's about looking at the relevancy. As for receiving the current minister of heritage, that would be more logical because he's a minister now. What I want to know is, what are we doing to get back this money? It is still in the bank account of an individual that is still behaving in an aggressive, anti-Semitic manner, insulting manner for a whole community and the entire population of Quebec and Canada. I would stop on that, but I believe this motion is just political games there is nothing concrete to see here, and I certainly will not support this motion. Thank you.
Julian?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, I was the first to ask for the contract with Malherbe to be cancelled when this information first broke. The NDP took this very seriously. We asked that this contract be simply cancelled. I agree with what Mr. Champoux said.
Absolument pas tenable pour quelqu'un.
This was an untenable situation for somebody having a contract when he acts in a racist, anti-Semitic manner. He has proved this on several occasions. So as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing is that we try as much as possible to recover the money, the $130,000. That is a very important aspect. We must deliver on that. I know we have the minister here appearing before us next Thursday in 7 days. We will ask him these questions and the officials of the department. So that's very important.
Because I was the first to call for the cancellation of the contract, because of his despicable racist and anti-Semitic views, I believe it is extremely important that we get that money back. And we have the minister coming next Thursday. That is vitally important. I think that is an issue where all four parties around this table agree that that money, by every means possible, that money needs to be taken back for taxpayers. Now, the fact that we have the minister coming next Thursday gives us that opportunity to ask these questions, and I have to say how disappointed I am that yet again we have the CRTC before us, and yet again it was cut off. The opportunity to ask questions to the CRTC about affordability and cell phones, about the broadcasting situation in our country that is in crisis, all of that was cut off by a motion that is, as Mr. Champoux pointed out, simply another motion that is designed to, instead of getting to the heart of the matter, which is getting the money back, is intended to try to go fishing, to try to find some kind of, I don't know, some kind of other headline. What our committee should be doing is pressing the minister on all of the aspects of the important obligation that this government has to getting that money back. I deplore the fact that the money has not been recuperated, and I intend to ask the minister that at the meeting that she will be attending next Thursday. The motion that has been presented is factually incorrect. It wasn't a number of MPs, it was myself. I was the one who asked the question about the date. And the answer satisfies me. Whether or not there was a few hours between the email and the information, that to me is not relevant. What is relevant is getting the money back from taxpayers, and what is relevant is ensuring that a notorious anti-Semite, anyone who has expressed anti-Semitic views or racist views, never gets a government contract again. And we are seeing a rise of hate. We are seeing a rise of Islamophobia. We're seeing a rise of anti-Semitism. We're seeing a rise of racism and misogyny. We're seeing a rise of homophobia and transphobia. But hate in all of its appalling, toxic forms is appearing now, and that is what this committee should be taking on. We have a safe sports study that we haven't completed because every single meeting there's another motion from the Conservatives that cuts short our ability to complete the safe sports study. We were not able to complete our questioning of the CRTC today because another Conservative motion. It's every single time. Ms. Thomas said she would make this committee hell. She was very public about that, and we are seeing that, how that plays out in real form. It means that the athletes that suffered so much are still waiting for months and months and months, because every committee hearing, every committee meeting, there is another Conservative motion designed, I don't, for whatever, their internal purposes, I guess. They put it out on TikTok, I don't know. But they are blocking the Safe Sports
Point of order.
study.
Point of order.
They are blocking our ability to ask questions of the CRTC. They're even
order.
blocking me from
Mr.
speaking.
Thomas, I was about to speak. You don't even let me rule on anything. You just keep butting in. Mr. Shields had his hand up on a point of order. I was about to point to Mr. Shields.
I'm sorry, Chair. Am I allowed to say point of order in addition
No,
to another
because
member?
Mr. Shields said it first.
Oh.
Mr. Shields.
So only one person can say point of order?
You can come after Mr. Shields.
I did come after Mr. Shields.
Well, Mr. Shields has not even spoken, Ms. Thomas.
But I believe I can say into the mic point of order without being yelled at by you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Thomas, you constantly interrupt the proceedings. Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would request that my honorable colleague stop impugning what he believes I might be thinking. I object to that line of thought that he's expressing.
Okay, Mr. Shields. Ms. Thomas, you have a point of order?
Actually, he did. If you were paying attention.
Was it you, Kevin? Oh, I didn't see your hand up.
Yeah,
Kevin.
no,
Thank
yeah,
you.
it
Go
was
ahead.
up, but that's
Have
fine.
a point of order.
Yeah, just stick to the topic. There's no sense bashing the Conservatives here and there. What we're dealing with is the motion in front of us. As for the CRTC, Madam Chair, you know they were only here for 1 hour. We had not agreed to the CRTC. They never agreed to stay for 2 hours. There was no discussion here today. It was maybe down at that end that they talked to them about 2 hours, but at this end, there was no conversation that, in fact, the CRTC was here for 2 hours. If you look, today, the second hour was to be in camera to deal with Safe Sport, but, Madam Chair, the CRTC was not invited for 2 hours today. And I want to make that clear. They were invited for 1 hour.
Now, Mr. Julian, you were speaking.
Yes, and they were prepared to stay for 2. And I communicated that to all members of
Yes,
this committee. So
you
did
did.
Mr. Champoux.
You did.
So no member of the committee can say, well, we didn't know that they were prepared to stay for 2 hours. Every member of the committee was.
That's
but
false. Madam Chair, point of order. I did not know that they were prepared to stay for 2 hours. I'm sitting here. I had no recollection that the CRTC has told me they would like to be here for 2 hours. Those statements are false. I did not know that. It clearly states 1 hour. I wasn't told they wanted to stay for 2 hours. That statement is false. And I would like it withdrawn.
Mr. Julian.
I move adjournment. This is ridiculous, Madam Chair. I move adjournment.
Discussion? Pardon?
So, point of order, Madam Chair. Is the motion is the vote to adjourn the meeting? Okay.
Vote to adjourn the meeting. Is there anyone objecting to that?
You go to a vote.
I beg your pardon,
There's
Ms.
no discussion. You go directly to a vote.
You go to a vote, so I'm asking if there's anyone who is objecting, then I will go to the vote that will be counted by the clerk. That's how it works. I don't just assume that. Thank you. Anyone objecting?
I object.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. I didn't have my
I said I
earpiece
don't
on.
want to adjourn, so I object.
You object, all right? Okay, so let's call the vote, please, clerk.
The motion is, the vote is on the motion to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Cotto?
Yes.
Ms. Dillon?
Yes.
Ms. Gainey? Ms. Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Noor Mohammed?
Yes.
Mr. Waugh?
No.
Mrs. Thomas?
No.
Ms. Gladue?
No.
Mr. Shields?
No.
Monsieur Champoux? Mr. Julian?
Oui.
That is 6 yeas, 4 nays.
Well, sorry?
So the motion.
6 yeas, 4 nays. Yes, the meeting is adjourned.